Theology at CMU, and I have the privilege of kicking off our event tonight. This afternoon when I met Dr. Turek, I spilled my entire Starbucks drink on the ground, and he said, quote, "This is why we can't have nice things." So, despite me introducing this evening, I'm sure that we are going to have a very nice time together. But I want to begin by saying a huge thanks to CMU and Student Life for their help facilitating this event. They've just gone to great lengths to make this happen, and we're super thankful for them. Also want to thank all of the other clubs on campus that have helped promote this event, namely Nate and Matt from FCA, Brandon from TNL Master Plan, Eric and Lydia from InterVarsity, Madison from Young Life, and Brian from Truth Matters, and every other club and individual that helped get all these people sitting here. We are super, super thankful for you. Also, Julie Brown, Sarah Malkanji, and Paulette Bourget, they helped in getting the community to this event. So if you are not a CMU student, you can thank them for helping get you to this event tonight. They were a huge help with that. Elizabeth Sharp, who is our wonderful faculty advisor, she helps us be able to be a club on campus. And then the individuals that have supported Ratio Christi financially. It's because of your generosity that we're able to do events like this, among other things. And last but not least, John Vanderveld and Karen Vanderveld, our directors. We want to thank them. Yeah. It's because of your guys' faithfulness and dedication to the mission that God has given you that you've helped so many of us here as members of Ratio Christi not be a part of the 75% of students that leave their faith behind in college. And so that's really why Ratio Christi exists. It's to give students philosophical, historical, and scientific reasons for following Jesus. And so, without further ado, we would like to welcome up Frank Turek to the platform.
Good evening, Mavericks. I want to go back to September 29th, 2006. That's when Petty Officer Michael Mansour is a United States Navy SEAL operating in Ramadi, Iraq. Mansour is standing on a roof in Ramadi, and he's standing in front of a doorway to this roof. He has two Navy SEAL teammates lying in the sniper-prone position next to him. They've already taken AK-47 fire and a rocket-propelled grenade, but they're not exactly sure where the enemy is. There's a bit of a lull in the fighting. Insurgents have blocked off the streets in Ramadi, and there's someone on the loudspeaker in the town mosque yelling, "Kill the Americans!" As Mansour and his team are looking for the next attack, an insurgent from an unknown location throws a grenade up on the roof. It hits Mansour in the chest, and it falls to his feet. Due to the length of the throw, there's no opportunity to pick it up and throw it back. He has only a split second to make a decision. He can leap through the doorway behind him and save himself, but if he does, his two teammates lying on the roof will surely die. Mansour yells, "Grenade!" But instead of jumping backward to save himself, he jumps forward, chest first, onto the grenade. It detonates. 30 minutes later, 25-year-old Michael Mansour is dead. His two teammates lying on the roof receive only minor injuries because Mansour's body muffled the blast. One of the survivors said at Mansour's funeral, "Mikey looked death in the face that day and said, 'You will not take my friends, I will go in their stead.'" I've never seen a United States president cry until April of 2008. That's when President George W. Bush invited Mansour's parents into the East Room of the White House to give them their son's Medal of Honor posthumously. The president couldn't even get through the citation without breaking down. Since then, Mansour's high school in Garden Grove, California, built a new stadium. They named it Michael A. Mansour Memorial Stadium. The golden trident insignia that the SEALs wear dominates the 50-yard line. January 2019, North Island, California, just outside of San Diego, the United States Navy commissioned the USS Michael Monsoor, the newest guided missile destroyer in the fleet, 𝗧𝗏 class. This is Monsoor's mother, Sally, being escorted onto the ship named in honor of her fallen son. Now, why did they do this? Because Michael Monsoor literally sacrificed himself to save his friends. There's no greater love than to sacrifice yourself to save your friends, said Jesus of Nazareth before he went to the cross. Michael Monsoor sacrificed himself to save his friends. The question is, would anyone sacrifice himself to save you? And the answer is, someone already has. His name is Jesus of Nazareth. But in today's culture, many people don't think the story's true. They think it's invented. They think it was made up by religious people, because we know religious people embellish things. And it's got miracles in it, like a resurrection. We don't believe in miracles anymore. How can we believe in such a story? Well, I actually think it's true, and I think it's actually easy to show that it's true. You only need to answer 4 questions in the affirmative to show that it's true. In other words, if you investigate these 4 questions, I think you'll realize that the answer to these 4 questions is yes, and if the answer to these 4 questions is yes, then Christianity is true. What are the 4 questions? Here are the 4 questions. Actually from our TV show, which is on Wednesday nights on DirecTV channel 378, so it's on tonight. Actually, it's on right now, because it's 9 p.m. Eastern time. It's obviously not live. We're also on Roku. If you have DirecTV, it's channel 378. We're on radio every Saturday mornings around the country, but you can listen to it podcasted, so it's on podcast here. If you tried to listen to that, it would be what, 8 a.m.? If you're a college student on Saturday, you don't get up to the crack of noon, so forget that, okay? The podcast is called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, and we present evidence for Christianity, and we cross-examine ideas against it. That's our website right there, crossexamined.org. Now, why are these the 4 questions? Truth, God, miracles, and the New Testament. And this is going to serve as our outline here tonight. We're going to go through these 4 points, or 4 questions. Does truth exist? Why is that important? Because you hear people saying there's no truth, or you got your truth, I got my truth, or all truth is relative, right? You've heard all these claims. Well, if there's no truth, quite obviously, Christianity can't be true. Of course, if there's no truth, atheism can't be true either, right? In fact, if there was no truth, would you even go to school? Why would you be here at Colorado Mesa University if there was no truth? You're here to learn truth, right? So we're going to deal with that question first. Second question, does God exist? Obviously, Christianity can't be true if there's no God. But I hope to show you tonight that there really is a theistic God. What's a theistic God? That's a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator who created all things and sustains all things, and whose every attribute is infinite. We're going to look at 3 arguments for this being. These arguments are taught in the Bible, but you don't need the Bible to know them. In fact, we're not even going to refer to the Bible in question 2. You can show God exists without any reference to any religious writing. Third question, are miracles possible? Obviously, Christianity can't be true if miracles are not possible. But I hope to show you tonight that not only are miracles possible, but the greatest miracle in the Bible has already occurred, and even atheists are admitting the data for this miracle. We'll see that here tonight. Then we're going to get to the key question, is the New Testament true? The New Testament doesn't have a prayer if there's no truth, no God, or no miracles. But if truth exists, if God exists, if miracles are possible, then we can see if we have reliable enough evidence from the New Testament documents to tell us if one particular event from the ancient world took place, what would that event be? The resurrection, right? Because if the resurrection occurred, if Jesus really rose from the dead, game over, Christianity's true. Of course, if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, game over. You might as well sleep in on Sunday and do what you want the rest of the week, because if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, Christian, your faith is in vain, as even the Apostle Paul said in his letter to the Corinthians. Forget it. So in other words, you can verify whether or not Christianity is true by seeing if Jesus rose from the dead. Okay? Now, those are the 4 questions we're going to go through, and we can't cover all of this in great detail due to the limited time. So if you want to go further, we have the book available on the book table, as well as a 12-part DVD series. We have another book over there called Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case. I've noticed that when atheists are arguing against God, they're actually stealing aspects of reality that would only exist if God existed in order to say he doesn't exist. In effect, they have to sit in God's lap to slap his face, in my view anyway. Now, all the proceeds from the sale of the books and the DVDs will go to feed needy children. Mine, okay? Just so you know, all right? Actually, you don't actually need to buy a book to get what I'm going to say to you, because I want to send you the entire PowerPoint presentation, even slides I can't show you, if you text the word evidence to 44222. Text the word evidence, not with quotes on it, just the word evidence to 44222, and I'm going to send you this entire PowerPoint presentation in a PDF format. Now, if you miss it, I'm going to put this up at the end, so don't worry about it, all right? All right, so we got to get moving here. We got to start right here at point 1. Does truth exist? Are you guys ready to go? Yeah. All right. Now, whenever you start talking about truth, you always have to start with Jack Nicholson, right? Because Tom Cruise had him on the witness stand, and he said to him, "Colonel, I want the truth." And Nicholson said, "You can't handle the truth." Only one guy got it right. Mavericks, come on. He didn't say it that way. If he said it that way, the movie would have gone nowhere. You can't handle that. That's not how he said it. Here's how he said it.
I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
All right, let's try it again. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. Now that felt better, didn't it? That was worth coming out here tonight, wasn't it? We could go home feeling better right now. Well, there's a lot of people that can't handle the truth. They're saying, you got your truth, I got my truth, all truth is relative. Well, if you don't get anything else out of what we talk about here tonight, this is going to be the most important thinking skill we're going to talk about. And I don't care whether you're an atheist, a Muslim, a Christian, a Hindu, whatever you are, it doesn't matter. This is going to be worth thinking about. Because this thinking skill is so critical, it will help you avoid a lot of pain. Why? Because this thinking skill will help you discover what is false. And half the battle in life is trying to discover what is false so you can avoid it and concentrate on what is true. Now, this thinking skill is so simple, but to show you what a dimwit I was 33 years old, I already had a master's degree, and I didn't know this. And the easiest way of showing this to you is to demonstrate using this thinking skill. Suppose someone were to come up to you and say something like, there is no truth. You should ask that person a question. What should the question be? Yes, is that true? Is it true that there's no truth? Because if it's true that there's no truth, the claim there is no truth can't be true, but it claims to be true. Did I say that right? Can everybody see that this is known as a self-defeating statement? What's a self-defeating statement? A self-defeating statement violates the law of non-contradiction, or a self-defeating statement doesn't meet its own standard. And the way you can identify a self-defeating statement is to turn the claim on itself. Turn the claim on itself. So if I were to say I can't speak a word in English, what would you say to me? Yeah, you're using English right now. You turn the claim on itself, and you're using English. Obviously, that's self-defeating. Or if I were to say my parents had no kids that lived, right? You'd say, hey, or my brother is an only child, right? You go, these words don't make sense. They're self-defeating. Well, there's a lot of phrases in our culture today that don't make sense. They're self-defeating. And I want to show you several of these and show you how to turn the claim on itself. Now, people don't always go around saying there is no truth. They say it in different ways. Like they might say something like, all truth is relative. If someone were to say that to you and you were to turn the claim on itself, what would you say back to them? Yeah, if somebody says all truth is relative, you say, is that a relative truth? No, that's an absolute truth claiming that all truths are relative. You see that? It's like saying I can't speak a word in English. Sometimes people say it this way. There isn't the truth, only my truth. Right? I get to live my truth, you get to live your truth, all that. There isn't the truth, just my truth and just your truth. Now, what would you say to somebody who says this? If you turn the claim on itself, you would say, is that just your truth or the truth? Right? Because if it's just your truth, it's just your opinion. It doesn't apply to anybody else, right? But if it's the truth, it defeats itself. Do you see that? I know this is going to sound shocking, but really, there's no such thing as my truth or your truth. There's just the truth. Now, there are claims or truths that apply just to me and not to you, like my name's Frank and maybe your name's Bill or Mary or something. Yeah, we get that. But it's objectively true that my name's Frank and your name is Bill or your name is Mary. It's objectively true that that applies to you. Those are objective truths. It may be just your opinion that chocolate tastes better than vanilla, right? But it's objectively true that if you like chocolate more than vanilla, that's objectively true. So all truth is objective truth. Sometimes it isn't said either of these ways. Sometimes it's said this way. It's true for you, but not for me. Somebody says it that way, what would you say to them? This is the interactive portion of the program. Turn the claim on itself. This is also self-defeating. It's just a little bit more subtle. If somebody says it's true for you, but not for me, say, hey, is that true for everybody? It's true for you, but not for me, true for everybody? Because if true for you, but not for me is true for everybody, then true for you, but not for me can't be true because it's true for everybody. Did I say that right? I know that can give you intellectual constipation if you think about it long enough. But that's because it's self-defeating. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English. Actually, there's a more fun way of dealing with this. If somebody says it's true for you, but not for me, go try that with a police officer who pulls you over. Like say you're going 100 on Highway 70 out here. Cop sees you, pulls you over, walks up to the car, knocks on the glass. He says, you were going 100. It's easy to get out of a ticket. You simply say, ha, that's true for you, but not for me. And you speed away. No, if it's true you were going 100, that's just true when talking about you at that time, at that place. I go to a lot of churches. I normally ask people, do you think Christianity is true? And most people will say yes. And then I'll ask them why. Do you know what answer I get more than any other? Because I have faith. Is that a good answer? Does your faith change whether or not God exists or Jesus rose from the dead? No. I mean, do you have to believe something to make it true? Do you have to believe in gravity to stay on the ground? Do people who don't believe in gravity float away? Hey, look, there's another one. Hey, if you believe, you'll come back. No, that's not the way it works. You say, why is the Bible always talking about faith then? Because there's two kinds of faith. There's belief that, and then there's belief in. Belief that is getting evidence that God exists, that Jesus rose from the dead. That's what we call apologetics. Doesn't mean you're saying you're sorry. It means you're giving evidence for what you believe. But all the belief that in the world won't get your moral transgressions forgiven. For that, you got to go from belief that to belief in. You know, James, the half-brother of Jesus, who wrote that little book in the New Testament called, you guys are a sharp group tonight. James said even the demons believe that God exists, but they tremble. Do you realize that the demons know that God exists better than we do? Yeah, but they don't trust in him. Why? Because they don't want to trust in him. There's a difference between belief that and belief in. And we know this in relationships, don't we? When I first met my wife 36 years ago, I got evidence that she would be a good wife. But all the evidence in the world didn't make her my wife. I had to take a step of trust in her to ask her to be my wife. And in a momentary lapse of judgment, she said yes. That's the difference between belief that and belief in. And most of the time when the Bible's talking about faith, it's talking about the second kind, belief in. And what it really means is trusting in what you have good evidence to believe is true. That's what faith means. Trusting in what you have good evidence to believe is true. Yesterday when I flew from Charlotte, I got evidence that the pilots were well trained. But I didn't really trust in them until I got on the plane, right? There's a difference between belief that and belief in. And if you don't want to go from belief that to belief in, you don't have to. God is not going to force you into heaven against your will. How about this? You hear this a lot too. There's no truth in anything but science. Turn the claim on itself. Somebody says this, what are you going to say to them? Yeah. Yeah, is that a scientific truth? Can you go in the laboratory and prove that? No, that's a philosophical claim. You can't prove that in the laboratory. In fact, in the book Stealing from God, we have a chapter on science. This is the title of the chapter. Science doesn't say anything. Scientists do. Do you notice that? Whenever you see some reporter saying science says this or science says that, you go, time out. Science doesn't say a word. Why do you think you get conflicting advice on COVID? Why do you think that? No matter what you think about it, you might think something different than your neighbor. Why? Because science doesn't say a word. Scientists say things. See, all data needs to be gathered, and all data needs to be interpreted, and who does that? Scientists. Now, sometimes they have the same data, but they interpret it differently. Sometimes they have different data, and that's why they get a different result. Sometimes the data isn't good enough to get the result they want, and so they're going to say it anyway. So science doesn't say a word, and philosophy undergirds science. If you're not a good philosopher, you're not going to be a good scientist, as Einstein himself said. He said, the man of science is a poor philosopher. In fact, you can't even read the Bible without philosophy. Everything you do is based on right thinking. If you can't think rightly, which is what philosophy is about, you can't do anything well when it comes to academics. And by the way, if you think about it, all truth doesn't come from... The most important truths in life don't come from science. Honey, do you love me? Yeah. Why? I don't know. Let's run an experiment. No. How about this? You hear this a lot. You should doubt everything. This is a skeptical claim. Yes. If you turn the claim on itself, you say, hey, should I doubt that? Why are skeptics skeptical of everything but skepticism? They don't seem to doubt that. Now, I don't care whether you're a Christian, atheist, or anywhere in between in this room right now. How many people in here, regardless of what you believe, sometimes doubt that what you believe is true? Look, if you don't have your hand up right now, you're probably not thinking much, right? I mean, I've written books on this stuff, and sometimes I wake up in the morning and I go, I don't even know if this is true. You ever do that? But then I start thinking about my doubts, and I realize that my doubts are emotional. They're not intellectual. In other words, the evidence for Christianity is really good. When I'm having a good day, everything looks fine. Bad day, don't know. Good day, fine. Bad day, don't know. Good day, fine. Bad day, don't know. What's changing, me or the evidence? Yeah, I'm going up and down. Sometimes I'll meet former Christians. They'll say, Frank, I'm a former Christian, but now I'm an atheist because I lost my faith. Now, I don't mean to be unkind, but since I'm originally from New Jersey, sometimes I am. When they say that, I want to say, when they say I lost my faith, I want to say, so? So, are you telling me because your psychology changed, God has popped out of existence? Are you telling me because your psychology is different than it was last year, that Jesus is now back in the tomb? You see, your psychology is not going to tell you whether Christianity is true or anything is true. Your psychology is not going to tell you whether it's safe to get on an airplane either. You may be scared to death to get on an airplane, but it's the safest way to get from A to B anywhere. Psychology is not going to tell you the truth. The evidence will tell you the truth. So if your psychology is going up and down, put that on the back burner and say, what's the evidence say? You see, because if you start doubting your doubts because they're emotional, they're not intellectual, then you're back to knowing something for sure. Have you guys ever thought about doubting your doubts? I doubt it. All right, how about this? This is the big one in our culture. You ought not judge. In fact, Jesus said, don't judge. Why are you judging, you hypocrite? All right, what's the problem with this claim? Turn the claim on itself. Somebody says you ought not judge. What are you going to say? Yeah, you're going to say, hey, isn't that a judgment? Or you might say, then why are you judging me for judging? Because it's a judgment. You might say, wait a minute, Frank, Jesus said don't judge. Nope, never said it. Sure he did. He said it in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. All right, I know this is going to sound a little weird, but it's true. There are no verses in the Bible. There are no verses in the Bible. You think when Matthew was writing his biography of Jesus, he said, here's chapter 7, verse 1? No. When were those chapter and verse divisions put in? About 500 years ago to help us navigate the text, which is a good thing, right? Because it's a real long series of books. It'd be hard to find your way around without numbers. The problem is we tend to think if there's a number in front of it, we can take it out and make it say whatever we want. This is a problem. Because when Jesus said, judge not, he didn't stop there, did he? What did he say? He said, judge not, lest you be judged. By the same standard you judge others, you'll be judged by that standard. So before you try and take the speck out of your brother's eye, you hypocrite, which is a judgment, by the way, take the log out of your own eye first, and then you'll be better able to help your brother, right? Is Jesus telling us not to judge here? No, he's telling us to take the speck out of our brother's eye. That involves making a judgment. He's simply saying, if you've got that problem in your life, get it out of your life first, then go help your brother. In other words, this is not a command not to judge. It's actually a command on how to judge. Don't judge hypocritically. If you've got that problem, fix it, and then go help your brother. But it would be completely ridiculous to say don't make judgments. Why? Number one, it's a judgment itself. And number two, you'd be dead already if you didn't make judgments. You made 100 judgments just getting over here tonight. Now you're questioning every one of them. This guy's crazy. What's he talking about, right? Everybody makes judgments. Atheists make judgments. What? What judgments do they make? There's no God. Jesus didn't rise from the dead. Bible's not true. These are all judgments. The question isn't whether or not you can make judgments. The question is, are your judgments true? I will say this, though. Jesus did save a very stern rebuke for people who were judgmental. And who were the judgmental ones in his day? Pharisees. Who were the Pharisees? They were the religious and political leaders of Israel. They helped run Israel. Some of them were on the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling council, to whom Rome delegated much of the legal authority to. These were the religious politicians, and Jesus went after them. Are you telling me Jesus got involved in politics? Yes! And he went after the politicians, and he wasn't so nice doing it. If you think Jesus was a sweet guy who's never said a bad word about anyone, you have not read John chapter 2, John chapter 8, or Matthew chapter 23. What happens in John chapter 2? Jesus makes a whip, and he goes and he jacks people up in the temple. What sweet and gentle Jesus did this? Yes. And then in John chapter 8, he's having the same argument with these Pharisees. And he gets to the point in the conversation where he says, your father is the devil. Jesus, you can't say that. That's not very Christ-like. Excuse me, I am Christ. Can you imagine you're having an argument with somebody and you stop and you go, your father is the devil. Never do that with a sibling, by the way. And then in Matthew 23, Jesus says to these same Pharisees, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Oh, you look great on the outside. You're whitewashed tombs, but on the inside, you're full of dead men's bones. You go a mile to make a convert, and then once you make them a convert, you make them twice as much a son of hell as you are. How will you avoid being condemned to hell? What? Sweet and gentle Jesus said this? Yes, Jesus was not Barney. Can't we all get along, boys and girls? No! I came to bring a sword. It's going to divide mother and daughter, father and son. Jesus was tough. In fact, why did they kill Jesus? Because he claimed to be God, which was blasphemy to the Jews and sedition to the Romans. And number two, he spoke truth to power and got himself killed because neither the Romans or the Jews wanted him to succeed, particularly the Jews. If Jesus succeeded, they were out of business. They actually know Jesus, he raised Lazarus from the dead. And what does Caiaphas say right after that? Better one innocent man die than all of Israel go down. So don't buy into this idea that Jesus was a sissy. He wasn't. He was tough. By the way, I've noticed one other thing about judging. You ever notice when you compliment somebody, which is a judgment, nobody gets upset? You know, if you say to your best friend, I really love you. You're such a wonderful person. I wish I could be like you. You think your friend's going to go, who are you to judge? No, he's never going to say that. Why? You see, I've noticed that people don't have a problem with judging. They just have a problem with judgments they don't like. In fact, if you tell somebody something that's true and they get mad at you, you just help convict them. As Augustine said, we love the truth when it enlightens us. We hate the truth when it convicts us. For you military people in here, by the way, I was in the Navy, which stands for Never Again Volunteer Yourself. And I have 2 sons in the Air Force. Anyway, For you military people, you always get more flack when you're over the target. If you start telling somebody the truth and they're shooting back at you, you're over the target. They don't want their evil deeds exposed. As Jesus said, men love darkness rather than light. Now, we could go through many more of these in our culture. We don't have time. We've got to move on. But can everyone see that this statement right here shoots itself? Can everyone see that? Okay, all the other statements we just went through shoot themselves too. They're self-defeating, so don't believe them. They're false. Now, there is objective truth out there. That's why there are universities. That's why there are schools and teachers and educators. And you can know it. So if our reasoning is good to this point, that means if truth does exist, that relativism and postmodernism are false. Why? Because they say it's true, that there's no truth. All right? Now, you can't get away from truth. Actually, you can get away from it temporarily. And let me just say, if you're not a believer here and you've come, thank you for coming. When we get to questions later, I want to warn you that if you're an unbeliever, I may ask you a question, and it's not fair of me to do that without giving you a warning, okay? Here's the question I might ask you, because I ask it of a lot of people. If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? I've had atheists stand at that microphone in front of hundreds of people and say, no! No? How's that reasonable? You're not believing something that's true? Of course it's not reasonable. The problem isn't in the head, the problem's in the heart. They don't want it to be true. They don't want there to be a God. Why? Because they want to be God of their own lives. They think God is going to get in the way of what they want to do. They're not on a truth quest, they're on a happiness quest. And Christians, half the time we are too, aren't we? We're suppressing truth just like everybody else because we want to do our own thing. The truth is inconvenient. So, ask somebody, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? If they hesitate or say no, the problem's not intellectual. The problem's emotional or moral. They don't want it to be true. All right? Anyway, let's now move on to point 2, and we're going to spend most of our time on point 2. Points 3 and 4 go quicker. But let's talk about point 2. Does God exist? And I mentioned there are 3 arguments for a theistic God. The first is from the beginning of the universe, known as the Cosmological Argument. Now, cosmological comes from the Greek word cosmos, which means world or universe. And it says if the universe had a beginning, it must have had a beginner. The second argument is the argument from design, known as the Teleological Argument. Now, telos is a Greek word meaning design or purpose. And it says if there's design in the universe and design in you, life, then there has to be a designer. Now, these 2 arguments have some scientific evidence behind them. We'll see some of that as we go here tonight. The third argument doesn't have any science behind it, yet it's the argument we've all intuitively understood since we were very small children, and it's the argument from morality known as the moral argument. And it says that there's one thing really morally wrong out there, just one. Like it's wrong to torture babies for fun, or it's wrong to murder 6 million people in a Holocaust. Then there has to be a God. Why? Because if there is no standard of righteousness that we're obligated to obey that's beyond us, then everything's just a matter of opinion. That would just be your opinion against the baby torturer's opinion, or your opinion against Hitler's opinion. Well, we know these things aren't a matter of opinion, so there must be a standard beyond us that we're obligated to obey. We'll get to that later. We got to start right here at point 1, or argument 1, the cosmological argument. Now, you got to admit it was worth coming here tonight just to see God do that. Wasn't it? Some of you missed it. Let's see it again. Some of you have said, I've never seen God move. Oh, really? Look at that. Right there. Now, this is the argument that many say points back to the big... Frank, you know, we're Christians in here, and we don't believe in the Big Bang. You guys don't believe in the Big Bang? I believe in the Big Bang. I just know who caused the Big Bang. In fact, the Big Bang is so well accepted that even atheists are admitting it. Stephen Hawking, who was probably the top physicist in the world until he died 4 years ago, as you know, he had ALS. He was kind of a medical miracle. ALS normally kills people in a few years. Hawking had it for like 40, okay? But here's what Hawking said about the beginning. He said, almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. That space, time, and matter literally came into existence out of nothing. There was no space, time, or matter, and then it came into existence out of nothing. Now, Hawking tried to come up with another explanation other than God. He failed, but he's admitting the data. In fact, you know what his explanation was? In the last book he wrote called A Grand Design, this is on page 181. Here's what he wrote. Remember how I said science doesn't say anything, scientists do? Here's what Hawking said about how the universe got here. He said, because there is a law like gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing. John Lennox, a brilliant Christian mathematician and philosopher from Oxford University, said about that, when brilliant scientists say nonsense, it is still nonsense. Okay? Because gravity doesn't create anything, and gravity didn't exist anyway. Gravity was created with space-time continuum. Now, it wasn't just Hawking who said these kind of things. Agnostic cosmologist Alexander Vilenkin from Tufts University put it this way. He said, with the proof now in place, cosmologists, and by the way, a cosmologist is not someone that puts on your makeup, all right? That's somebody that studies the universe. Cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is now no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. Now, it's unusual for scientists to use the word proof. Why? Because science is tentative. But Vilenkin sees so many points of evidence pointing in one direction toward a beginning that he labeled it a proof. Now, why is it a problem that there's a cosmic beginning? Because if space, time, and matter literally had a beginning, whatever created space, time, and matter can't be made of space, time, and matter. In other words, the cause must transcend space, time, and matter. Nature can't be the cause of the universe because nature is the effect. It's not the cause. Now, what is the evidence for this? We're not going to go through it tonight. Why? Number one, we don't have time. Number two, it's all in the book, chapter 3. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. And number three, it's not controversial. Atheists are admitting it. So we're just going to jump to the bottom line. Here's the bottom line. If the universe had a beginning, it must have had a beginner. We've got two options. Either no one created something out of nothing, which is the atheistic view, or someone created something out of nothing, which is the theistic view. Now, which view is more reasonable? I was at Texas A&M 15 years ago, and I put this slide up, and one atheist said, oh, I think number one is more reasonable. I said, number one? Let's look at number two for a second. Number two says, someone created something out of nothing. Now, that's a miracle, right? But at least you got a miracle worker. You got someone. Number one is a miracle with no miracle worker. That's clearly absurd. Do you realize that everyone believes in at least one miracle? Christians believe in more than one, but we believe the first miracle was someone created something out of nothing. The atheists believe that no one created something out of nothing. At least many of them do anyway, like Lawrence Krauss, who wrote a book called The Universe from Nothing, where he tries to make this case. It doesn't work. But no, there has to be an uncaused first cause. And if the universe had a beginning, it can't be the universe as having the uncaused first cause. Or the universe can't be the uncaused first cause. Now think about this, ladies and gentlemen. If space, time, and matter literally had a beginning out of nothing, then whatever created space, time, and matter can't be made of space, time, and matter. In other words, the cause must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful to create the universe out of nothing, personal in order to choose to create. Why personal? Because to go from a state of nothingness to a state of creation, someone had to make a choice, and only persons make choices. Also, the being would have to be intelligent to have a mind to make a choice. Now, when you think about a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause, who do you think of? God. You say, well, how do you know it's the Christian God, Frank? We don't. Yet. I mean, this could be Allah or some other theistic God, right? We've got to see if Jesus rose from the dead to see if this is the Christian God. But once we investigate that, we're going to realize that the same being that walked out of the tomb 1,988 years ago is the same being in whose divine nature created the universe out of nothing. But This argument doesn't get you all the way to Christianity. It gets you 6 attributes of God, but not all of them. All right? So, a question that Leibniz asked, a great philosopher a number of years ago, he said this: if there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing at all? If there is no God, why does anything exist? Think about it. We don't have to exist, right? We all had beginnings. The universe had a beginning. There must be something outside the universe that didn't have a beginning. And by the way, if the cause of the universe is timeless, did the cause of the universe have a beginning? No, he's outside of time, so he doesn't need a cause. So the question, who made God, doesn't make any sense. He's the uncaused first cause. He's the unmade maker. He's the uncreated creator. He is what Aristotle might call the unmoved mover. Now, as I say, there's a lot more in the book on that, but we've got to get to the design argument, the teleological argument. There's 2 aspects to this. The universe appears designed and life appears designed. Let's start with the universe. In recent decades, scientists have discovered the universe is fine-tuned. What does that mean? That if you were to change any one of a number of factors about our universe, virtually imperceptibly, there would either be no universe or no universe that could support life. And even atheists admit this. Again, Stephen Hawking. Here's what he said about the expansion rate at the beginning of the universe. He said if the expansion rate of the universe was different by 1 part in 1,000 million a second after the Big Bang, the universe would have collapsed back on itself or never developed galaxies. If the expansion rate was that infinitesimally different at the very beginning, none of us would be here. Now, you can't come up with any sort of evolutionary explanation for this. You can't say, well, the expansion rate evolved to this point by chance, whatever that means, right? Why? Because this is how the expansion rate started at the very beginning. Seems to me the same being that created space-time and matter is the same being that designed the expansion rate to be precisely what it needed to be for this universe to exist. Also, the gravitational force, if it were altered by more than 1 part in 10 to the 40th power, we wouldn't exist. What's 1 part in 10 to the 40th power? That's 1 part in 1 with 40 zeros following it. You say, Frank, I can't get my head around that number. I know, neither can I, so let me give you an illustration. Take a tape measure and stretch it across the entire known universe. That's a long way. You can't get that tape measure at Lowe's. Set the gravitational force at a particular inch mark on that tape measure. I realize gravity's not measured in inches, but this is just to give you a scale idea in your mind. If the strength of gravity were different by 1 inch in either direction, across the scale as wide as the entire known universe, we wouldn't be here. That's 1 in 10 to the 40 precision. I don't have enough faith to believe that that value just landed there by chance. And oh, by the way, does chance cause things? Is chance a cause? Who caused this? Chance. He was just here. No. Chance is not a cause. Chance is a word we use to describe mathematical possibilities. Chance doesn't do a thing. When scientists use the word chance, you know what they really mean? We don't know. That's what they mean. Look, there's only 2 explanations for that value being where it is. It was either designed to be there or it wasn't. Which do you think is more reasonable? It was designed to be there. Now, it's not just our universe, and we could go through a dozen of these. Change any one of them, this universe doesn't exist. Okay? But let's look at our solar system, because our solar system appears to be designed with us in mind. Take a look at it right here. Here we are, third rock from the sun. Just a little bit closer to, or a little bit further away from the sun, we couldn't spot. A little bit closer to, we burned up. A little bit further away, we freezed. It's called the Goldilocks zone. It's not too hot, it's not too cold, it is. That's a lie, it's too hot here in the sun. Okay? Axial tilt, 23.5 degrees. Change that slightly, we don't exist. Earth rotation, 24 hours. Change that slightly, we don't exist. The size and distance of the moon from us. Change that slightly, we don't exist. If Jupiter right here was not in its current orbit, we couldn't exist here on Earth. Why not? What does Jupiter do for us? Its gravitational force is so strong, it attracts most of the meteors and space junk to it rather than us. It's a cosmic vacuum cleaner. In fact, if you take a close-up look at Jupiter, you know what these dark marks are? Those dark marks are comet fragment strikes that are bigger than the Earth. Thank God for Jupiter. Because if Jupiter wasn't there, we wouldn't be here. Same thing is true with Saturn. It directs stuff away from us as well. In fact, you want to see the size of the planets? Here they are. You got Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Earth. Look at poor Pluto down here. You know, Pluto recently has been demoted as a planet. I don't know about you, but I think it's size discrimination. Take a look at this. You can hardly see Pluto. Take a look at this. That's Arcturus. That's another star in our galaxy. Here's the sun over here. Jupiter is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Earth is invisible. Pluto, forget about it. All right? All right, keep an eye on Arcturus now. Where's Arcturus now? You see it way over here? Way over here. Here's Arcturus. Way to the right. That's Antares. That's another star in our galaxy. The sun is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Jupiter is invisible. Earth, Pluto, forget about them. In fact, if the Earth was the size of a golf ball, Betelgeuse here, look, I don't name the stars, okay? If the Earth was the size of a golf ball, Betelgeuse would be 5 or 6 Empire State Buildings high. The heavens are awesome. And the average distance between stars in our galaxy is 30 trillion miles, and all that distance is necessary for us to exist here on Earth. Now, 30 trillion miles, how far is that? Far. Take you at least 2 tanks of gas and a Toyota Prius to go 30 trillion miles. A number of years ago, my wife and I took our sons to the Desert Museum outside of Tucson, Arizona. If you ever get to go to Tucson, south side of the city, they got this Desert Museum out there. And we were out there on a dark, clear night. And on one of those nights, you can see thousands of stars in the sky. So we're out there one night, and the guide says, hey, if we look up at 9:03, we'll see the space shuttle in orbit. It was orbiting the Earth at the time. I said, come on. We're not going to see the space shuttle. It's only 120 feet long. It's 350 miles up. Oh, me of little faith. At 9:03, the guide goes, look! And we look up in the sky about 70 degrees above the horizon. There's an object streaking out of the western desert sky relative to us about like this. I mean, it's really cooking. When it got right about here, it disappeared. I don't know whether Scotty beamed it up or what. Actually, what happened was, despite the fact that we were in total darkness, the space shuttle was so high up that the sun was still reflecting off of it, and when it got out of the range of the sun, we couldn't see it anymore. Now, when the space shuttle was in orbit, the space shuttle was traveling at about 18,000 miles an hour. That's 5 miles per second. You got trouble getting to school in the morning? Take the space shuttle, right? 5 miles a second. Well, I did a little calculation to try and figure out how long would it take us if we could get in the space shuttle and go from our star, the sun, to another star in our galaxy, an average distance away, 30 trillion miles. Now, how long would it take us if we could go 5 miles a second? How long do you think it would take us? A long time. You must be a math major. It would take us 201,450 years. That means if you got in the space shuttle at the time of Christ and started at our star, the sun, and started to travel to another star in our galaxy an average distance away, you've been going 5 miles a second for 2,000 years, you would be less than 1/100th of the way there right now. And we're going to explore space. No, we're not. We're not going anywhere in space. We can hardly get out of our solar system. It took us 9 years to get to Pluto. Now, the psalmist has something to say about the size of the universe. You know what he says? He says, for as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far as he removed our transgressions from us. As high as the heavens are above the earth. That's how great God's love is for us. Now, how high are the heavens above the earth? Well, the Hubble Space Telescope has helped us discover just how massive this universe is. A number of years ago, they trained the Hubble on 1/24 of the sky for like 11 days. What's 1/24 of the sky? Go out tonight, put a piece of rice on the end of your finger, hold it up. That piece of rice represents about 1/24 of the sky. And this is called Hubble Ultra Deep Field. You can Google this. The video I'm about to show you is in the public domain. I don't know if you can see this. This is a little washed out here, but the bottom of this are mountains, okay? This is the southern hemisphere. And when they trained Hubble on 1/24 of the sky, they took a number of pictures. So I'm going to play this video for you. When you see the video come up, you're going to see the constellations come up, and then Hubble is going to zoom in on 1/24 of the sky. There's no audio, it's just video. Are you ready? All right, here we go. Hubble Ultra Deep Field. There are the constellations. Let's see what's in 1/24 of the sky. What you're looking at are nearly 10,000 galaxies in 1/24 of the sky. How many stars are in a galaxy? They say billions. How many stars are there in the universe? Researchers at the University of Hawaii figured it out. Here's their estimate. The number of stars in the universe are about equivalent to the number of sand grains on all the beaches on all the earth times 100,000. And to go from one star to another star just in our galaxy, going 5 miles a second will take you over 200,000 years. Now you know what it means when it says, for as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is God's love for those that fear him. Now you know what it means when it says the heavens declare the glory of God. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't ever want to hear any of you here at Colorado Mesa University call anything awesome other than God. Awesome shirt, dude. Awesome shot, dude. Awesome TikTok video. No! What word are you going to say for God? Now, do you feel insignificant? You shouldn't. Why? Because as awesome as the heavens are, they're not made in the image of God, but you are. In fact, this is you in the womb at 11 weeks. Question, is this animal, mineral, vegetable, or human? That's human. Not only are the heavens designed, so are you. In fact, let's go back earlier than 11 weeks. Let's go back to when your mother and your father got together to conceive you. Have you guys had this talk before? I see some younger people in here, so I'll try and be discreet. I also see some older people in here, so I'll try and be discreet as well, just in case you've forgotten how this works. Okay? When your mother and your father got together to conceive you, your mother unconsciously perfumed her egg to attract your father. And then your father sent the entire population of the United States, 300 million soldiers, toward your mother's egg. And then there was a race. And you won! Don't let anyone ever tell you you're not special. You beat out 300 million others. You have blown away anything Michael Phelps has ever done. Now, seeing some of you in here limp in here earlier makes it hard for me to believe you were the fastest soldier in the gene pool, but you were. Now, your soldier was 20 to 30 times smaller than a grain of salt, yet it contained half of the 3.2 billion letter genome, your DNA software program that makes you you. All those letters in the right order. And your mother's egg was about the size of a period at the end of a sentence in an average book, and it contained the other half of the 3.2 billion letter genome DNA software program that makes you you. And when your soldier and your egg came together, a new 100% genetic human being was created. You know, you have not received any more genetic information from this point till right now. Your genetic information has just duplicated itself. In fact, there were only 4 things separating you from adulthood: time, air, water, and food. Those are the same 4 things that separated 2-year-olds from adulthood. Does this have implications on the abortion issue? Yeah, I think it does. We don't kill the 2-year-old. Why do we kill the unborn child in the womb? Genetically, it's the same. You say, wait a minute, Frank. You can't legislate morality. All right, no extra charge for this. This was the subject of our first book, creatively titled Legislating Morality. All laws legislate morality. Every law declares one behavior right and the opposite behavior wrong. You can't think of a law which doesn't legislate morality. The only question is, whose morality will be legislated? And when people say, don't legislate your morality on me, I say, why not? Would that be immoral? And why are you imposing your morality on me right now? You're saying I ought not impose ought nots, but you're imposing that ought not on me. You're doing the same thing you claim I can't do. Actually, there's a better answer. When people say, don't impose your morality on me, I say this: this isn't my morality. I didn't make this stuff up. I didn't make up the fact that murder's wrong, that rape is wrong, that abortion's wrong, that theft is wrong, that men were made for women and women were made for men, and the best way to perpetuate and stabilize society, which is the reason the government's involved in marriage to begin with, is to legally recognize the man-woman relationship over every other relationship. I didn't make any of this stuff up. This isn't my morality. This isn't your morality. This just happens to be the morality. The one that Thomas Jefferson said was self-evident. The one the Apostle Paul, who said in Romans chapter 2, the Gentiles are now have the law of the law written on their hearts. Everybody knows this morality, but some people just don't like it. So if you have a problem with demorality, you don't have a problem with me. You have a problem with the Creator upon whose nature this morality is derived. All right, no extra charge for that. Let's go back to this. From this point till right now, a construction project of astonishing complexity began taking place. Cells began multiplying at a rate of 4,000 cells per second. Brain cells began multiplying at a rate of 100,000 cells per second. For most, anyway. Some cells became brain cells, others lung cells, others heart cells. Some cells went so far across you to become what they needed to become that it would be equivalent to you today walking across the United States alone. And that construction project continues to this very day. You just made 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million. Knock it off. Are you thinking about this? Or are you going, wait a minute, Frank, time out. I got to concentrate. New red blood cells coming up. No, this is just happening. How's it happening? Aristotle discovered something about 2,400 years ago. He didn't know anything about blood cells, but he noticed that everything in nature is going in a direction. For example, why does an acorn, if it's properly nourished, always go in the direction of becoming an oak tree? Why doesn't it become an elm tree, or a birch tree, or a seahorse? You say, well, it's programmed to become an oak. Well, who programmed it? And is an acorn conscious? Is an acorn in the ground going, all right, what do I have to do to become an oak tree? No. But it reliably goes in the direction of becoming an oak tree. And here's what Aristotle recognized. If it doesn't have a mind of its own, yet it reliably goes in a direction, there must be an external mind directing it toward an end. Thomas Aquinas came along in the 1200s and said, this is going to be my 5th way to argue for God, that all of nature is going in a direction. It's going toward a final cause. In other words, nature is orderly. If it's orderly, there must be an orderer. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, this is why we can do science. Because nature is orderly. Nature presupposes order and cause and effect. Or science presupposes order and cause and effect. Where does order come from? It comes from an orderer. Where do laws come from? Lawgivers. So the point here, if you want to look more into this, this is in the book Stealing from God, but the main point here is Aquinas and Aristotle aren't talking about a cause way back when, like a Big Bang cause. They're talking about a cause every single second of existence, because everything maintains its order. This is why the Apostle Paul comes along and says, in Christ we live and move and have our being, and Christ holds all things together. And the writer of Hebrews says, God sustains all things by his powerful word. This is a sustaining cause right now. God is to the universe what a band is to music. If a band were up here playing music, it would be creating and sustaining the music, right? What would happen the second the band stopped playing? Music's over. Same thing is true with God. He creates the universe, he creates you, he creates the natural laws, and he sustains you in the natural laws. So you don't just get a designer, you get a sustainer from this argument. Now, we've got to keep moving here. We've got to move to the moral argument. Let me ask you a question. How do you know that your quarterback throwing a touchdown is better than your quarterback throwing an interception? Not just rules. You've got to know the purpose of the game, right? If there's no purpose, you can't say that your quarterback throwing a touchdown is better than your quarterback throwing a pick six, right? You've got to know the purpose of the game. Now notice, in football, the purpose of the game comes from outside the game. In other words, the players aren't making up the rules or the purpose. That's established before they ever take the field. Now, the commissioner and the owners get together, and sometimes every year they change the rules a little bit, right? Now, the rules of football are arbitrary. The rules of life are not. Why? Because outside this game, there's a being who created everything and has given us a purpose. What is the purpose? What is the purpose of life? Why are we here? Why are we here? Where does it say that? Is our purpose just to do the right thing? Is that why we're here? Jesus tells us the purpose. In John chapter 17, when he's praying about us to the Father, he says, "This is eternal life, that they," meaning us, may know you, God the Father, and Jesus Christ whom you've sent." The purpose of life is to know God. Not just believe that he exists, but trust in him. To know God and then to make him known, the Great Commission. That's why we're here. That's why you can see that certain ways of living are good and other ways of living are bad because you know the purpose. Same thing in a football game. Also, let me ask you this. What does this word mean? What does it mean to submit? No one likes that word. Let's break the word in two. What does sub and mission mean? What does mission mean? Mission means we have a goal, we have a purpose, we're going somewhere, right? And when you put yourself under that mission and say, I want to be a part of that, you're submitting yourself to the mission. If I'm on a football team and I'm a diva wide receiver and I say, man, keep throwing me the ball, come on, give me the ball more. And the coach goes, time out, man, if you get the ball too much, we're going to lose. We've got to spread the ball around. That's the way we're going to win. Now, if I say, okay, you're right, coach, I want to win, so I'm going to submit myself to that mission, then I'm submitting myself for the good of the team, for the goal, for the purpose. If there's no God, there's no ultimate mission. There's no purpose. So there's no right way to play the game or wrong way to play the game. Everything is a matter of opinion. But we know that's not the case, don't we? Do you know that if there is no God, the Nazis were not wrong? Why? It's just our government against their government. If there's no standard beyond our governments, how could we have said at the Nuremberg trials the Nazis were wrong? We couldn't, but we appealed to a standard beyond our government. International law, also known as nature's law from the Declaration of Independence. C.S. Lewis called it the moral law. It's God's nature. It's what Paul refers to in Romans 2. If there's no God, love is no better than rape. Oh, you may like love better, but it's not better than rape. It's just your preference. If there's no God, there are no human rights. On a college campus, we have a very heightened sense of justice. People are asking for rights and demanding rights, but do you realize if there's no God, there are no rights to anything? There's not only no right to natural marriage, there's no right to same-sex marriage. There's not only no right to abortion, there's no right to life. There's no right to anything if there's no God. It's just your opinion. In fact, if there's no God, racism isn't wrong. Slavery isn't wrong if there's no God. If there's no God, tolerance is no better than intolerance. By the way, are Christians commanded to be tolerant? No, Christians are actually commanded to be loving. Tolerance is too weak. Tolerance says hold your nose and put up with them. Love says reach out and help them. And sometimes you can't tolerate what is unloving. If you do tolerate what is unloving or harmful, you're not loving. Does love require approval? No, every parent knows. Every kid knows. How many in here are former children? Okay, you know too, right? If your parent approves of everything you want to do, are you loving? Is that parent loving? No, unloving. And of course, you can't complain about the problem of evil if there's no God. Why? Because evil proves God does exist. There would be no such thing as evil unless God existed. Not because God is doing evil, but because he's the standard of good, which would make evil even possible. What do you mean? Well, C.S. Lewis found this out. C.S. Lewis was an atheist early on in his life. He said, there can't be a good God because there's too much injustice in the world. And then one day he had an epiphany, and he realized that objection didn't work, and he wrote it in the book Mere Christianity. Here's what he wrote. He said, as an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how would I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? See, you wouldn't know what a crooked line was unless you knew what a straight line was. You wouldn't know what injustice was unless you knew what justice was. Something can't be not right unless something is. Something can't be immoral unless something is. So evil doesn't disprove God. Evil may prove there's a devil out there, but evil can't disprove God because evil requires a standard of good. You see, evil is like cancer. If you take all the cancer out of a good body, you got a better body. What happens if you take all the body out of the cancer? There's nothing there, right? In other words, evil is a privation or a lack in a good thing. You have to have something good in order for evil to exist at all. In other words, the shadows prove the sunshine. In order to have shadows, you got to have sunshine. Oh, you can have sunshine without shadows. You can have good without evil. But you can't have evil without good. You can't have shadows without sunshine. So if evil exists, and we all know it does, then God exists. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. Now, we can ask questions, and maybe during the Q&A we can ask, well, why does God allow certain evils? We can do that. We don't have time to get into it now. But if evil exists, it means actually that God does exist, not that he doesn't. All right? Now, some of you are going, wait a minute, Frank. Let's review these three arguments. Cosmological, teleological, moral. What attributes do we get from these three arguments? We get a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent, moral creator who created all things and sustains all things to this very moment. This is the God of the Bible, and we haven't even opened the Bible yet. How do we know it's the God of the Bible? For that, we got to go to the next question. But before we do, some of you are going to say, Frank, atheists have to have arguments against this. If they do, they don't work. Why? Nobody said anything better than C.S. Lewis. So stick with me, this 2-page quote from C.S. Lewis. He points out that if atheists are using reason to say that God doesn't exist, they're defeating themselves. Here's what he said. Check this out. You got to follow it. Suppose there were no intelligence behind the universe. In that case, nobody designed my brain for the purpose of thinking. Thought is merely the byproduct of some atoms within my skull. But if so, how can I trust my own thinking to be true? You with him so far? Now he says, but if I can't trust my own thinking, of course I can't trust the arguments leading to atheism, and therefore have no reason to be an atheist or anything else. Unless I believe in God, I can't believe in thought, so I can never use thought to disbelieve in God. Boom. As John Madden would say. What else can you say? Right? You have to steal reason from God to say he doesn't exist. If your brain was put together by natural forces that didn't have its end in mind, why would you ever trust it? The reason you can think is because your mind is made in the image of the great mind, God. Now, this doesn't show the Christian God yet. For that, we got to go to the third question. Are miracles possible? Now, number 3 is the shortest of the 3. So you guys are going, how's he going to get through all this? He doesn't have much time left. Don't worry. Here we go. We know that truth exists and God exists. Are miracles really possible? Well, a lot of people think miracles are impossible. Like, for example, Noah. All right, Christians, don't let this leave this room, okay? Yeah, it's being streamed. Too late. All right. Can we all just agree that Noah and the ark is crazy? Thank you. And a resurrection. How many people in here have seen someone rise from the dead? None of us have seen someone rise from the dead, yet every one of us has to believe it as a Christian. We have to believe that someone rose from the dead, even though it's something we don't see. How rational is that? And for some reason, the big problem miracle in the Bible is Jonah. Is that a whale of a tale or a tale of a whale? What's the deal with Jonah? Can you really believe in Jonah? How? What is the greatest miracle in the Bible? No, the resurrection's easy. The greatest miracle in the Bible is... I got some of you a second time. The greatest miracle in the Bible is the first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If God can create the heavens and the earth out of nothing, can he do whatever he wants that's not logically impossible inside the universe? Of course he can. Well, here's the interesting part. Even the atheists are admitting the data for the first miracle. So if Genesis... Now, obviously, Hawking didn't think it was God, but what else could it be? His answer didn't work. Gravity. If Genesis 1:1 is true, if God can create the universe out of nothing, can he do whatever he wants that's not logically impossible inside the universe? Of course. Of course he can raise Jesus. Of course Noah's crazy. Unless God exists. Of course Jonah is nuts unless God exists. Of course people don't rise from the dead unless God exists. Now a lot of people will say, I can't believe in miracles because I've never seen one. That is not a good reason to disbelieve something. Why? Because you believe in a lot of things you've never seen. Like what? Your mind. Have you ever seen it? You're using it right now, I hope. Love. Have you ever seen love? Oh, you may have seen someone loved, or you may have loved somebody. You've never seen love. It's an immaterial reality grounded in the nature of God. A number of years ago, I had a couple of debates with Christopher Hitchens. You remember Christopher Hitchens? He was a brilliant British atheist who sounded more brilliant than he was because he had a British accent. And in our second debate, which you can see on our YouTube channel, some student asked Hitchens this question, Christopher, what is love? And Christopher, being a materialist, eventually said, love is a chemical. And I said, don't tell that to your wife. Honey, do you love me? Yeah. Why? Because I got the chemical today. Love is not a chemical. It's an immaterial virtue grounded in the nature of God. You've never seen justice. Oh, you may have seen justice done or injustice done, but it's not something you see with your eyes. It's grounded in the nature of God. You've never seen gravity. Oh, Frank, come on. There it is right there. Nope, you're not seeing gravity. What are you seeing? You're seeing the effects of gravity. By the way, that's how we know God exists. We know God by his effects. If somebody says, how do you know God exists? I know God by his effects. There's a creation. That's the effect. There must be a creator, the cause. There's design. That's the effect. There must be a designer, the cause. There's a moral law written on our hearts. That's the effect. There must be a cause known as a moral lawgiver. Jesus rose from the dead. That's the effect. There must be a being that can raise somebody from the dead. That's the cause. So we're reasoning from effect to cause. That's what scientists do. You've never seen George Washington, yet you believe he existed. Why? Because he's left effects behind that are best explained by the person known as George Washington. The same thing is true of Jesus. Now, by the way, if miracles do occur, by the way, there doesn't need to be one miracle since Jesus and the apostles for Christianity to be true. I do think miracles occur today, by the way. Just look at Craig Keener's hernia-inducing 2-volume set called Miracles, where he looks into all the data for this. But the point here is if miracles do occur, they have to be rare. Why? Because if miracles occurred all the time, they wouldn't get our attention. Yeah, they wouldn't be miracles. Imagine if people rose from the dead routinely. What would the resurrection of Christ mean to us? Nothing. You go to somebody, you go, Jesus rose from the dead to prove he was God. And the guy goes, so what? Uncle Carl just rose from the dead 2 weeks ago. Now I got to give the inheritance back. No, it's got to be a rare event if it's going to get our attention. So yes, miracles are possible because God does exist. Now we just need to see if the grand miracle in the New Testament has occurred. That's what we're going to look at briefly before we go to your questions. And there are several lines of evidence that the New Testament writers are telling the truth about this. I'm going to list them, but we're only going to look at 2. I'm going to list 8. They all begin with the letter E. We have early sources, very early sources, that comprise the New Testament documents. There are eyewitness details throughout the New Testament. And you can get the book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, to see what they actually are. There's embarrassing stories. I'll explain that in a minute, as well as excruciating deaths. We're going to get to that. Embedded confirmation. What is that? This is the best evidence you've probably never heard of that the New Testament writers are telling the truth. I call it embedded confirmation, but if you Google these 2 words, you're going to get a wealth of information on it. Just Google undesigned coincidences. Undesigned coincidences. In fact, 𝗦𝗨𝗣𝗢𝗥𝗧 at Western Michigan University wrote a book a few years ago called Hidden in Plain View. It's about undesigned coincidences. I don't have time to explain what they are, but as soon as you start reading these, you're going to go, oh yeah, how could they have made this up? They couldn't. Expected predictions. That deals with Old Testament prophecy. If I had just one Old Testament prophecy to make my case on it, would be Isaiah chapter 53. Written 700 years before Christ. Go read it tonight and say, who is this about? Written 700 years in advance. Extra-biblical writers. There's about 10 ancient non-Christian sources within 150 years of Jesus' life who mention Jesus and the apostles briefly. And when you add up all their references together, you get a story congruent with the New Testament. Who are these people? Household names like Josephus, Suetonius, Thallus, Phlegon. These are people you read every morning, I'm sure, okay? They mention Jesus and the apostles. And finally, the explosive growth of the church out of Jerusalem, which is really hard to explain if Jesus hadn't risen from the dead. Why? What could the Jews or the Romans do to squash Christianity immediately? Show the body. Go to the tomb, take the body out. Here he is. He's dead. Stop all this nonsense talk about the resurrection. They couldn't do that. Why? Because he was still using his body. All right? Now, let's just take a look at a couple of these quickly. The first is embarrassing stories. What are embarrassing stories? There's a principle that historians use when they're trying to discover if a writer's telling the truth or not. It's called the Principle of Embarrassment. It goes like this. If there's something embarrassing to the author or authors, it's probably true. Why? Because you're not going to invent details that make yourself look bad, right? You might make them that make you look good, but not bad. In fact, let me ask you guys a question. How many people in here have ever lied to make yourself look good? If you don't have your hand up right now, you're lying to make yourself look good. And it's not working. We know you're lying. All right, how many people have ever lied to make yourself look bad? No, you don't do that. You don't do that. You might lie to make yourself look good, but you won't lie to make yourself look bad. Well, the New Testament writers, and this is true of the Old Testament too, but we're just going to look at the New Testament. The New Testament writers have filled the narrative with embarrassing stories that make them look bad. That's why we call this the 𝗏 factor. They're not making this up. Notice, for example, Peter, their leader, is called Satan by Jesus. Do you think they invented this? Do you think Mark, who wrote this down, at one point said to Peter, hey, Pete, I'm going to make this a real interesting story. I'm going to have the Lord call you Satan. What do you think Peter would have said? Have him call you Satan. It's embarrassing. I'm the leader. And then Peter says, Lord, I'll never deny you. What does he wind up doing? He winds up denying him 3 times. This is embarrassing. And at the crucifixion, all of the disciples, maybe with the possible exception of John, they all run away. This is like a Monty Python movie. Run away! They all run away. And who are the brave ones? The women. The women are the brave ones. Now, who wrote the New Testament down? Men. Now, what man is going to invent that he was hiding for fear of the Jews while the women went down and discovered the empty tomb? Would any man in here invent that? I mean, if I was there and I invented it, I'd make myself look good, wouldn't you? I'd write down, let's see, we marched right down there and we overpowered that elite Roman guard. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. John said, get out. Peter roundhouse kicked him. Philip said, we'll be back. And then on Sunday morning, we marched right down to the tomb, and we saw Jesus, who congratulated us on our great faith. And then we went and comforted the trembling women. I would never say I was Mr. Sissy Pants why the women went down and discovered the empty tomb. And oh, by the way, why would you never say the women were not the first witnesses in that culture? Forget about the fact that it was embarrassing to men, it was. But why would you never say that independently? Yes, because a woman's testimony was not considered on par with that of a man. So if you're making up the New Testament story, you'd only have the men be the first witnesses. Yet all 4 Gospels say the women were the first witnesses, which is telling us what? They were! I actually had a woman come up to me once, and she said, I know why Jesus appeared to the women first. I said, why? And she said, because he wanted to get the story out. I said, that is an excellent point. I had not thought of that. Because ladies, when your man comes home from work, does he say much? There could have been a nuclear explosion down at the plant. He's not going to tell you. You'll see it on the news before you hear it from him. You'll be watching the news going, hey, hon, what? Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you the nuke blew up. I've been hot for 3 days. What's for dinner, right? He's not going to tell you. I can't even believe this next verse is in the New Testament, but it is. At the Great Commission, where Jesus says, go, therefore, make disciples of all nations. Notice how he doesn't say make believers, right? There's a difference. Make disciples of all nations. He's there giving his disciples his final instructions. And right there in verse 17, it says, some believed, but some doubted. He's standing right in front of them, resurrected, and they're doubting. It's like they're going, you see that guy over there? Yeah. That guy over there is Jesus. No, I'm telling you, it can't be Jesus. He was just killed not long ago. No, I'm telling you, it's him. Look, the Romans killed him. He's dead. It's him. Spear went in his side. Blood and water came out. I'm telling you, Jesus, it's dead. It's him. It can't be. It is. How do you know? The women told me. They're not making this up. There's even potentially embarrassing details about Jesus in there. In John chapter 3, it says his own family came to seize him and take him home. They thought he was nuts. They thought he was out of his mind. You may have heard the scholars say, oh, the New Testament writers embellish Jesus to be God. Oh, really? Then why is Mark chapter 3 in there, which is almost universally recognized to be the earliest gospel? That's embarrassing. Jesus is called a drunkard. He's called demon-possessed. You think they made that up? He has his feet wiped with the hair of a prostitute, which easily could have been seen as a sexual advance. And oh, by the way, notice there are 2 prostitutes in Jesus' bloodline. Who are they? Rahab and Tamar. Do you think Matthew and Luke, when they were writing down the genealogy, said, you know what, I really think we ought to spice up the Messiah's bloodline a little bit. Let's put a couple of prostitutes in there. Rahab, Tamar. No! They're just telling the truth. In fact, there's a lot of shady people in the bloodline of the Messiah. Judah, from where we get the term Jew, not a good guy. Read about him in Genesis. David, a man after God's own heart. Yeah, but he's a liar, adulterer, and a murderer. Gee, I guess there's hope for the rest of us then, huh? Bathsheba's in there. You know, when Matthew gets to her name in the genealogy, he won't write her name down. You know what he says instead? Uriah's wife. Ooh. He's telling the truth, but it's a slam. Why? Who's Uriah's wife? Bathsheba was married to Uriah, and David had Uriah killed so he could have Bathsheba. He's telling the truth, but it's a slam. You don't find this stuff. You don't even find this stuff on the news, right? On the news, what do people do? They hide their embarrassing stuff. The New Testament writers and even the Old Testament writers, they put it in. They go, nope, we're sinners. We're fallen. There's only one who isn't. He's the Savior. Now, there's much more in the book on that. We got to do one more, and that is excruciating deaths. And this is the piece of evidence that says these men who were in a position to know whether Jesus had risen from the dead or not died excruciating deaths when they could have saved themselves by simply saying it never happened. Now, it's important as we look at this that all the writers of the New Testament, we need to understand, all the writers of the New Testament, with the exception of Luke, were all Jews. Luke was the only Gentile. Every one of the writers was a Jewish believer in Yahweh. They thought they were God's chosen people. Why would they invent a resurrected Jesus? They didn't think somebody could be God, claim to be God. That was blasphemy. And they didn't think someone could rise from the dead in the middle of time. They thought somebody would rise from the dead at the end of time, but not in the middle of time. Why would they make this up? In fact, you could ask, what did the New Testament writers have to gain by making up a new religion? What did these Jewish people get by saying Jesus was God and he rose from the dead? They got kicked out of the synagogue, and then they got beaten, tortured, and killed. Last time I checked, that was not a list of perks. We're going to start a new religion. We are? Yeah. What's it going to get us? Well, first we get kicked out of the synagogue, then we'll get beaten, tortured, and killed. Well, sign me up. What a great idea. Why haven't we thought of this earlier? In fact, they had every motive to say the resurrection did not happen, not every motive to say it did. I get the question a lot. Maybe you do if you're a Christian. Are there any non-Christian writers that talk about Jesus and the apostles? Yeah, I just mentioned them briefly a few minutes ago. But you know what is underneath the question? Are there any non-Christian writers? You can't really trust the New Testament writers because they had an agenda, right? See, they were religious people. They embellished things. If you think about that for more than 10 seconds, you'll realize how silly that objection is. What did these people have to gain by saying it was true? Nothing. They had everything to lose temporally by saying it was true. My friend J. Warner Wallace has been on Dateline 5 or 6 times because he's a cold case homicide detective. He's been on that program more than any other cold case homicide detective. And he says that when he finds a dead body that he knows has been murdered, he says there's only 3 reasons why that guy's dead. Not 1,000 reasons, there's just one of these 3 or a combination of the 3. There was either a sex issue, a money issue, or a power issue. Sex, money, or power. Now, those are 3 good things, but they're so good that we'll often take shortcuts to get them. That's why we're motivated to do evil, to get good things. And so if you're going to say that the New Testament writers invented this, you've got to find at least one of these 3 motives to say they invented it. Ladies and gentlemen, did the New Testament writers get real popular with the ladies for saying Jesus had resurrected from the dead? No. Did they get money for saying he resurrected? No, they're not 21st century prosperity gospel preachers. Did they get power by saying Jesus had resurrected from the dead? No, they got persecuted. They got the opposite. Paul had power as a persecutor. When he becomes a Christian, then he's persecuted. They had no motive to make this up. And then why would they die for a known lie? You say, wait a minute, Frank, if you're going to say that martyrdom proves Christianity, don't you have to say that martyrdom proves Islam? No, why? There's a lot of differences between the Muslim martyrs of today and the New Testament martyrs of New Testament times, but let me just give you the main difference for our purposes here. The Muslim martyrs didn't witness anything to show them that Islam is true. They just have faith that it's true. The Christian martyrs, on the other hand, saw Jesus with their own eyes rise from the dead. They saw Jesus. They touched Jesus. They ate with Jesus. They verified that Jesus had risen from the dead from their own senses. Many people, will die for a lie they think is the truth. Nobody will die for a lie they know is a lie. And the New Testament writers were in a position to know whether it was a lie or not, and they went to their deaths anyway. Now, what I'm about to say in conclusion here, for you Christians who believe the Bible's inerrant, is going to sound like heresy for a minute, but it's not. Stick with me, because I believe the Bible's inerrant too. Christianity is not true because a series of documents we put under one binding we call the Bible says it's true. In fact, Christianity would be true if the Bible never existed. Say, how can that be? Do you realize there were thousands of Christians before a line of the New Testament was ever written? Why? There were eyewitnesses. Was Paul a Christian before he wrote the book of Romans? Of course he was. Why was he a Christian? Because he witnessed the resurrected Jesus. Was John a Christian before he wrote the Gospel of John? Of course he was. Why? Because he witnessed the resurrected Jesus. Was Matthew a Christian before? Yet why? Because you get the idea, right? In other words, Christianity did not originate with a book. Christianity originated with an event, the resurrection. In fact, you could put it this way. The New Testament writers did not create the resurrection. The resurrection created the New Testament writers. There would be no New Testament documents written by Jews in the first century unless Jesus rose from the dead. Why would they get themselves beaten, tortured, and killed? For a lie that they knew was a lie? No. They knew it was true because they witnessed it themselves. That's why they wrote it down. Thankfully, they did write it down so we could order our lives according to it, but it would have been true even if they never wrote it down. All right, so there's more in the books. You can go there. Let's sum the whole thing up. Does truth exist? Someone says there's no truth. You're going to say, is that true? Does God exist? 3 arguments. First argument, cosmological argument. Second, teleological. Third, moral. Are miracles possible? Yes. The greatest miracle in the Bible is creation. The first verse, even atheists are admitting the data for that, is the New Testament telling us the truth about the resurrection? Sure seems to be. We got all those lines of evidence, and we only looked at 2 of them. Now, if you want to go further, the books are available back there, including the DVDs. Don't forget to type the word evidence to 44222. Also, we're now teaching online courses. Just go to crossexamine.org and click on online courses. You'll see them there. We're on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. In fact, we're streaming this. This is Clint, by the way, who is our video master. Here he is, Clint Boland, ladies and gentlemen. You guys are all YouTube stars now because this is being streamed on YouTube or on Instagram as well. By the way, we're so into YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook that we've actually combined these 3 into one social media platform. We call it UTwitface. Okay, so you may want to sign up for UTwitface. It's kind of a Jersey thing, all right? Don't forget about the podcast. It's called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. We're on DirecTV as well, and you can get all this by downloading the Cross-Examined app. 2 words in the App Store, Cross-Examined. 2 words in the App Store. It's got all this on there. It even has a quick answer section that you can go to when you're talking to people. So you can say, when someone says something, you can say, hey, hang on, I'm getting a text. Hey, what about this? All right. Now, this is not the end of the road, because on the 11th of November, Ratio Christie in this room is going to have the great 𝗧𝗔𝗫 here, and he's going to talk about Humans 2.0, what is the future of humanity? And so if you want to be a part of that, you definitely want to be here on November 11th in this room. Now, Ratio Christie meets Tuesday nights, John? And all the details on where they meet, what they do is apologetics like this. All the details on where they meet are on that table out there. So go out there and get some information. They meet once a week on Tuesday nights. And also, it's a 501c3 organization. Everything that you see here is put on by donations. If you want to bring the truth of Christianity to campus, see John or anybody at that table back there about how you can donate, tax-deductible donation, because people like 𝗧𝗔𝗫 are going to come in and others, and you're going to be able to shore up a group of believers here, all right? Now, last thing before I get to your questions. This appears to be true. The question is, so what? Well, you know what the best news of all this is that somebody actually did die for you. It's true. Someone did. Now, when I was in the Navy, we earned golden wings. I was in aviation, and they were hard enough to earn. But there's nothing more difficult virtually in any military to earn than the golden trident. That's what the SEALs earn. Very few people that start SEAL training make it through. Those that do make it through wear that trident with pride. It is their identity. When Michael Monsoor was buried in Rosecrans Cemetery in San Diego, California, just about every Navy SEAL on the West Coast showed up for his funeral. And when they passed his casket, they took off their tridents and pressed them into his casket. They took their identity and put their identity in the one that died for them, in the one that saved them. That's what we're supposed to do. But our culture says, oh no, put your identity in your political party, or put your identity in your ethnic group, or your race. There's one race, the human race. Or put your identity in your sexual orientation, or your boyfriend, or your girlfriend, or your major, or your bank account, or even your school. No, none of those things are ultimate, ladies and gentlemen. We're made to put our identity in our Savior. The Savior who didn't just die, he also rose again. Now, I don't know about you. Well, I do know about you. I can tell you about you. You have violated moral standards just like I have. In fact, there's not a day that goes by where I don't. Everyone in this room believes in justice, don't you? What does that mean for you and me? Uh-oh is right. We deserve punishment. But what the God of the universe did is he came into this space-time continuum that he created, and he allowed those who rebelled against him to torture and kill him so he could save them from the evil they did, the evil we did. Now, why wouldn't you accept that? Why wouldn't you say, he did that for me? I'll take it. Why wouldn't you repent of what you've done and simply say, that's why I'm here, to know God through Jesus Christ and to make him known? The only reason I can see somebody not doing it after they look at the evidence is they don't want to submit to the greatest mission of all time. All right. With that, we're going to go to your questions, and we have a mic set up for questions. And no one likes to ask the first question, so we're going to move right on to the second question. All right? And is that mic on, Clint? I'm working on it. All right. Okay, all right. So you can ask a question about anything that we covered here tonight or anything else you want. And normally this is Q&A, but I think tonight I'm going to do all Q, no A. All right? So everyone can ask a question. It takes all the pressure off me. All right? All right, once the first one gets up there, we'll start. Come on up to the mic if you would. We have to have some questions. I couldn't have covered everything perfectly. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Justin.
Hey, Justin, go ahead.
From your experience, what would you say, if there is one, the most effective of the apologetic arguments?
Well, it depends. I think today, probably for most, it's probably the moral argument. Because about 70% of the questions that I get on a college campus are related to morality, because that's where we live every day, right and wrong, good and bad, justice, injustice. I mean, people can not think about the beginning or the design. It's really hard to not think about right and wrong and morality because we deal with it every day. So I think morality hits people between the eyes more than anything. Now, this is where you're going to get the most pushback, too, because people are going to ask questions about, well, is God immoral for killing people in the Old Testament? You know, these kinds of questions. Now, that all presumes a moral standard. The question is, where does that moral standard come from, and what was God doing when he was doing those things in the Old Testament? Was it arbitrary, or was there a reason for it? So I think morality is probably the most powerful argument for most. Obviously, it's person-dependent. What do you think is the most persuasive?
I'm honestly not sure that makes a lot of sense to me. I've only, within the last couple of years, discovered apologetics, so I was kind of curious just from what you, because you've been doing this for decades, so I was just more curious. I'm really not sure myself.
All right, okay, well, thanks.
Thank you, though.
All right, appreciate it, Justin. Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name is Riley.
Hey, Riley.
First of all, I just want to say thanks for being here. Love all your content. It helped a lot with my evangelism that I've done personally. So, first of all,
well, thank Ratio Christie and John and Karen right behind you there. There they are, right there. They made it happen. All right.
So I love the cosmological argument, something I've used a lot. But I have this meta-philosophy class right now that I'm taking. We're kind of talking about how do we know logic and reason work, you know, and we know logic and reason work by checking it with logic and reason, and kind of talking about how we can't know anything outside of perceivable senses, you know. And so we didn't really apply it to this conversation, but he kind of talked about it in a way about how do we know logic and reason work for that argument, applying it to something outside of our universe if we only know that logic and reason work within our universe. So I just, not quite, kind of like just how would you respond to that?
Well, he may be, if I'm hearing this right, he's saying, how do we know the law of causality applies to the metaphysical, not just the physical? Is that what he was saying?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so like, you know, if you hit a cue ball into an 8 ball, it's going to move the 8 ball, right? And that's a physical causation right there. But how do we know that an immaterial being created a material universe? Do we have any sort of parallel in our world to say that that's what happens? Okay, I would say to that causality is not just a physical principle, it's also a metaphysical principle. Why? Because if it's not a metaphysical principle, logic wouldn't work. Think about it this way. Let's take the classic logical syllogism. All men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Notice there is no physicality between the two premises and the conclusion, yet it still goes through. Those two premises in effect cause the conclusion, and there's nothing physical going on here. Secondly, I would say our ability to think, our thoughts, even though we're using a physical brain, our thoughts are immaterial. So if I were to say to you, 2-ton pink elephant, suddenly a 2-ton pink elephant pops up in your head, but not literally. If it was, I just killed you, right? You can think of a 2-ton pink elephant in your head, and it's not physical. The thought isn't physical, even though we're trafficking in physical things with our brain. But the thought itself is not physical. It's an immaterial thought that you're having right now when I say 2-ton pink elephant. So I think physicality, I think causality works on physical things and metaphysical things. Here's a third example, the placebo effect. You know the placebo effect, right? People can take medicine. You got one group of people taking real medicine, another group of people taking a placebo, but they think it's the real medicine. And the placebo effect has been shown to actually help people get better if they just think they're getting the good medicine, right? Now, is it the same as getting the medicine itself? No, but they still get some degree better. Here's an instance where a thought affects the body, right? A thought is affecting the health rather than the physical, chemical medicine affecting the body. You have a thought affecting the body. And right now, when I say to myself, raise my right hand, that immaterial thought is causing a physical reaction in my physical body. And if causality wasn't metaphysical, I couldn't even do that.
I guess that was a pretty good response, but like part of the conversation we had was that only works within our perceptions of reality. And we don't know what is outside of our perceptions, and I guess that's kind of more the line of questioning I was asking.
Okay, if causality works in the universe, and it works in logic, and it works between physical and non-physical things in our own experience, why should we doubt causality from an immaterial God to a physical universe? What possible reason would we give to say, I'm not going to go with the odds-on favorite. I'm going to say, no, we just don't know. No, I think the odds-on favorite is an immaterial mind can create a physical universe, just like our immaterial mind can do things to our physicality right here.
It's basically saying it's a smart inductive leap in a way.
Yes, well, do we know for sure?
Yeah.
Well, no, we know very few things for sure, but the odds-on favorite is, yeah, if cause and effect works physically and metaphysically in this universe, why would we expect it not to work from God to this universe? It seems to me there's something else going on here. There's some sort of resistance that this person might have towards saying God exists.
Probably.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
All right,
Appreciate it.
thank you. Thanks, Riley. Yes, sir. What's your name?
I wanted to point out that you had an Old Testament scripture up there earlier. The second part of that says our sins are from us as far as the east is from the west.
Yes.
Because you go east and it never becomes west. West, it never becomes east, but north and south, north eventually becomes south, south becomes north. So I'd say that was one scripture that proves the Bible just there, because people believed in a flat earth at that time, or didn't really have any idea of a spherical earth. And that's the concept that you could get on a train and go around the world east, it's never going to be west. And you could go east, west, it's never going to be east. Now, north will eventually be south, south will be north. So
well, it is a figure of speech they're using there. But the point is well taken. As far as the east is from the west, well, that just means
nothing. There's no.
They're not connected at all. That's how far away that's how far away our transgressions are from God's mind. He's put them out of his mind. He's separated our transgressions from us because he's imputed us. He's not only forgiven us for what Christ has done, he's given us Christ's righteousness. All right?
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Hi there. My name's Chad.
Hey, Chad.
So I do have a question. So this is not in the perspective of being an atheist, but this question is, so after the death of the apostles and all the early witnesses of Jesus and Christianity, so the start of the early church, is it possible that the Bible has been tampered with, or things have been taken out to the point where maybe a couple hundred years later we would need some sort of restored gospel because the Bible is not the fullness of God's word?
Okay, good question. By the way, for those of you that have a phone, if you wouldn't mind taking a short survey, just text the word event to that number so you can help us improve what we're doing here. My friend J. Warner Wallace, the guy I mentioned a few minutes ago, the cold case homicide detective, has a section in his book, Cold Case Christianity, that he calls the chain of custody. Now, in police work, and we have some policemen in here, in police work, if you find a piece of evidence at a crime scene, you have to document that evidence, and it has to, if it goes to somebody else, there has to be a chain of custody so everybody knows where that evidence went along the way, and nobody could tamper with it, right? Well, Jim relates that, since he's a cop, to the chain of custody that we discover with the storyline of the New Testament. That the apostles all had people that followed them and wrote about what they learned from the apostles, and then those people had mentors that they mentored, and then they had people that they mentored, and they had people that they mentored. So there's a chain of custody of what the New Testament said, independent of the documents themselves. And when you look at that chain of custody, you wind up with the same basic storyline that you have in the New Testament documents. So it doesn't seem plausible that somebody could change the storyline of the New Testament documents when you have this continual 3 or 4 or 5 chains of custodies all saying the same thing through the early years of the church.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
By the way, Jim has a book that just came out, too, that you're going to want to get immediately. It's called Person of Interest. It is the most unique, most amazing apologetics book I think you might ever pick up. There's over 400 drawings in it, and it shows the impact of Jesus. Even if the Bible never existed, what kind of impact did Jesus have? You could reconstruct most of what's in the Bible just by looking at 6 areas that Jesus has impact. Some of the 6 include education, literature, music, art, science, and world religions. And he shows how Jesus' impact is unprecedented of any person in human history. And you can reconstruct the entire storyline of the Bible just in those 6 areas. Anyway, go ahead, sir. What's your name?
Mark.
Hey, go ahead, Mark.
So you mentioned love versus tolerance.
Yes.
And I just kind of wanted to see what you would say as far as how can we distinguish between those and how can we discern?
Okay, well, tolerance is just the idea that although I may disagree with you, I know you have a right to believe what you believe and express those beliefs, and I will treat you with respect, and I would encourage you to do the same for me, right? That's just tolerance. But tolerance isn't enough according to Christianity. If I see that you hold a belief that I think is harmful and God has said is harmful, then love would call me to not only try and tell you it, but try and care for you and help you stop engaging in that activity. Not just to go, well, I tolerate you. I don't care what you believe. Okay, you can believe that. You're wrong, but I'm not going to have anything to do with you. Love says I'm going to try and reach out to you and try and help you see the truth. So there's a difference there, right? Love seeks what's best for the other person. Let me show you something that Thomas Sowell said. You guys know who Thomas Sowell is? Thomas Sowell is hang on a second. Thomas Sowell is a 91-year-old economist. Easy for me to say. Here he is. Look at what Sowell said about just how we should treat one another, about what they want to hear. He said, when you want to help people, you tell them the truth. When you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear. A lot of Christians will not reach out to people who disagree with them, and maybe people in their family. They'll just go along with what they're doing because they don't want to take any consternation from the person. They don't want to take any blowback from the person. They just want to keep the peace. So they just tell them what they want to hear. Yeah, what you're doing is fine. I'm cool with it, right? You're not helping that person. You're helping yourself when you say that. The way you're helping yourself is you're just preventing yourself from hearing any consternation or getting any blowback. If you truly wanted to help that person, you would tell them as gracefully as you could the truth, even though they may hate you for it. Why? Because you love them. In fact, here is what Paul says about love. Love always protects. Love rejoices in the truth. Love always perseveres. By the way, this is a passage that everyone reads at their wedding, but nobody obeys. This is 1 Corinthians 13. This means that if we're going to love people, we can't just look the other way when they're doing wrong. We have to care about them enough to bring them both grace and truth. And that's hard, but we have to do it, to love them. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am, what's your name?
My name's Chrissy.
Chrissy, go ahead.
I'm kind of new to this whole Christian thing. So this is the first apologist thing I've gone to. But
by the way, you are eons ahead of most Christians because most Christians have never heard the word apologetics. Right? You at least sat through one event. Go ahead, yes.
What are your thoughts on the idea of there being a divine mother?
What do you mean by divine mother?
The idea that God has a wife and a counterpart that is female.
I would ask people, what evidence is there for that? I haven't seen any evidence for that. I haven't seen any evidence of that from the scriptures. I do know that God made both men and women in his image. Okay, now image isn't a physical thing. It means that we're God's representatives here on earth. Okay, we have mind, emotion, and will, and that we know, we feel, we want, we can make moral choices, and we can be his ambassadors. But I haven't seen any evidence in Christianity, certainly, and I think Christianity is true because God exists and Jesus rose from the dead. And you might say, well, how does that show that Christianity is true? Because if Jesus rose from the dead, then he's God, and whatever God teaches is true. Jesus taught the entire Old Testament is the Word of God, and he promised the New Testament. Because I just have a personal policy. If somebody rises from the dead, I just trust whatever the guy says, okay? So I don't see any evidence from Jesus, the New Testament writers, or the Old Testament writers about a divine mother.
Okay.
All right? Do you think such a person exists?
Absolutely, 100%.
Why?
Because I'm a girl, and if God's a guy, where did I come from?
Well, because God is so powerful, he can create both sexes. God doesn't have genitalia. He's just called a father because he has fatherly qualities. He's a protector. He's a creator. He's a provider.
So he just decided on a whim to make reproductive systems the necessity of male and female?
Yes, male and female. Why? Because we are imaging God here, and we are creating as imagers, not in the same way God creates, because God creates just from his power. We create by procreating with someone of the opposite sex.
So you're saying the power that God uses to create is different than the power we use to create?
Oh, yes. God is wholly different than us. We have a line, sir. You can get in line if you like. We are in a situation where was I going with this? God created males and females so we could create and be imagers of God. We could create offspring. And that's what we're supposed to do as imagers. But God himself is an immaterial being. He doesn't have genitalia. And one way we know this, other than the scriptures, is just think about any being that is created like us. We're composed, right? We have parts. And if we're composed, somebody must have composed us. But you can't go on an infinite regress of composers. At some point, you're going to get back to an uncomposed composer that composed everything else. And that's who we are. We are composed, but God is uncomposed. He doesn't have parts. He's immaterial, spaceless, timeless, powerful. All those attributes we talked about before. If that's really true, would you be a Christian?
I am a Christian, but I don't believe that.
Well, it's kind of an essential of the faith to believe who God is.
Well,
That's what we're here to do. We're here to know who God is.
Then.
What's that?
Guess I'm not a Christian then. Oh, well.
If it were true, would you be a Christian?
I guess if you're defining something that is true, that is Christian, if it was true, then I'd be a Christian.
Well, this is one seminar, right? There's a lot more to read, a lot more to study. Are you a student here?
No.
Are you local?
Yes.
Could you come to the Ratio Christi and learn more, the event on Tuesday nights?
I could, but I have karate that night, so.
Well, you could still get together with these people and learn. You don't have to meet Tuesday. You can meet other times with them. Sure. Just pursue the truth. Follow the evidence where it leads. That makes sense, right?
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Christy. God bless you. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Corbin. I just want to say
Corbin.
thank you again.
Uh-huh.
I find it, you said earlier that for miracles to still be happening, it would be a rare occurrence, right? Because it's an attention getter, right? But we see I find it weird because in the Bible, when Jesus shows up, miracles are happening like crazy. I mean, pre that, it's kind of a rare occurrence. And then we have his disciples, miracles are happening like crazy, prophetic, and all these healings. Peter's walking down the street, and people are getting healed by his shadow. Why is that not happening today?
Okay. I didn't have time to get into this due to the length of the thing already, but how many miracles are there in the Bible? There's about 250, okay? depending upon how you count them. Some of them are bunched, or there's multiples going on at the same time, or let's just take the round number 250, and let's take it from Abraham to Jesus. That's about 2,000 years. If you have 250 miracles spread over 2,000 years, how often do you get a miracle? You get one miracle every 8 years. So when we're reading the Bible, we think miracles are happening all the time. They're not. But do they happen every 8 years? Do you get a miracle and 8 years later you get another one and 8 years later? No. Where do they happen? In the Bible, miracles occur in 3 basic periods. Where God is doing miracles through people: Moses, Elijah and Elijah, and Jesus and the apostles. Why? Because these people have new revelation that needs new confirmation. Moses says, why is Pharaoh going to believe me? Moses, you're going to be able to do some miracles. Pharaoh will eventually see the point, right? Same thing is true with Elijah and Elijah. Same thing is true with Jesus and the apostles. There are periods in the Bible where there's hundreds of years there are no miracles, because there's no new revelation that needs new confirmation. That's the main purpose of a miracle in the Bible. New revelation needs new confirmation. We're not getting new revelation today that we're adding to our Bible, so we don't need people that have the gift of those miracles to do those things. Now, I think miracles do occur today, but I think God does it when he wants to in certain areas for certain reasons. But he's not confirming new apostles, he's not confirming new revelation, and that's why we don't see that same kind of thing happening like they did at those periods. If those things happened all the time, what would be the uniqueness of Moses, Elijah and Elijah, and Jesus and the apostles? They wouldn't be. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What about, like, Paul tells people to eagerly desire, like, the gift of prophecy? Like, I would consider prophecy a miracle, like people kind of reading your mail or whatever that might entail. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, we think of prophecy, we think of telling the future. Most of the time in the Bible, prophecy means speaking the word of God into someone's life, like preaching, teaching, those kind of things, okay? Now, can people do that today? This is what Christians argue over. I don't take a firm position on it, okay? There is a website that can give you the pros and cons or the arguments on each side. It's called Got Questions. There's an app, Got Questions. If you type in that app and Got Questions and type in prophecy, is it for today? You'll probably get 5 or 6 articles on it. Read those articles and see what you think.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Corbin. Yes, ma'am. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Erica.
Hey, Erica.
I just had just a question about a certain Bible verse that always kind of stumps me when I read it. It's John 20:23, and it says, "And when he had said this, he breathed on them and said, 'Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them. If you withhold forgiveness from any, it is withheld.'" And he's talking to the apostles for that. And so I kind of just have a question.
Okay, so John 20:23. This is just after Thomas. Is that where we are?
Yes.
Okay, so what's the question?
Just what it's talking. He's telling the disciples to go and forgive other people, and I'm just wondering what what you think of that, because every time I read that, I'm kind of just like, Jesus is the only, God should be the only one to forgive people, you know? So I just wonder.
If someone sins against you, you can forgive them and should forgive them. That's what he's saying.
So he's just saying it's a generic question.
What's that?
He's just saying that. I mean, it's a generic instruction to
everyone. To really dive into this, I'd have to read the whole passage and read around it, and I don't have that committed to memory right now. So, but this is consistent with Jesus elsewhere saying, how many times do you have to forgive your neighbor? 70 times 7, right? It means just forever. Just keep forgiving. That's what we have to do. So, but I'd have to look at more of the context to see exactly if there's any kind of peculiar angle to this verse. It just seems straightforward to me. We ought to forgive people who wrong us.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Erica. Yes, sir. What's your
earlier
name?
You spoke of...
What's your name, sir?
Oh, David.
Go ahead, David. Yes.
Earlier you spoke of inerrancy of Scripture. And I believe in the inerrancy of Scripture, literally word for word, God's word, God breathed. I just want to help out the young lady back here a little bit. When we look at words in Scripture, they have great meaning, sometimes beyond what our English translation gives us. For example, when God creates man and woman, he's using certain words, Hebrew words, that when we look those up, they have they have many things attached to each word. Example, the word image, when God says he created us in his image and likeness. The word image is a masculine word. The word image also has a physical idea to it, as well as non-physical. The word likeness, the Hebrew word is feminine, and the word likeness also carries the idea of the mental picture. So he's using these various words when he creates man and woman. He says, let us make man in our image and in our likeness. So he's speaking of his characteristics that he's creating us in, and those characteristics have both male and female attached, and they have so many things attached. So like he said, how many times did you see truth up here on the screens and hear him speak the word truth? A lot of times, because truth is what we need and the world needs. God's word carries that truth, and it carries it deeply for all of us to study and grow. I'm hoping that helps a little bit. If you want to talk more, sure, no problem. Thanks for letting me.
Oh, sure, David, thank you. Yeah, there's also a distinction to be made. We can show that the Bible, I think beyond a reasonable doubt, is true. It's God's word. But that's only halfway there. Yes, God has spoken. Now the next question is, what has he said? And now that's a whole nother level of study called hermeneutics. How do we figure out what it means? And so you could study a lot more, as you pointed out there, David, as to what the words mean and what God is communicating there. So my job here mostly is to show you that the Bible's true. Then you've got to take the next step. Okay, what has it said? And how can you deal with these questions that come up regarding what God's gender is? Go ahead, ma'am.
I'm Noelle.
Hey, Noelle.
Everyone else kind of brushed through that and forgot to say their name. So
Did you say Noelle?
Noelle, yes.
Noelle, go ahead, yes.
This might actually be more of a hermeneutics question within the definition that you just said there. So, grew up, homeschool, Christian, non-denominational, and then as I have grown, seeking out answers for myself, not just going with my great education and understanding of things, but what does this mean within my personal relationship with Christ, and not just a Sunday school answer. Something that I've begun to notice that has been a little disheartening is seeing all the divisions in the church. I mean, even from one Christian to another in my own church, and how that we can wound and hurt one another with those things. So I do believe there is absolute truth, but I think how we interpret it can sometimes be different. The Bible, for example.
Yeah, of course.
How do we do that in love, but also know that there has to be some kind of standard somewhere? Because we can call into conviction and I feel like I can watch this movie or hang out with these people.
What we do is we read Romans 14, because that's exactly what Paul is talking about in Romans 14. And if I had to sum up Romans 14, it would be don't major in the minors. On these secondary and tertiary issues, don't put your conviction on another brother or sister, and don't let them put their conviction on you, on these secondary and tertiary issues. We're not talking about the essentials of the faith, like we're saved by grace through faith, there is a God, we are not him, we're all sinners, Christ is going to come again, Christ imputes us his righteousness, Christ is a member of the Godhead, all these things. Those are the essentials of the faith. But whether or not you can go to movies, or whether or not you should drink wine.
I mean, you can look at a lot of things, but I mean, things that churches split over. I mean, we see that consistently and constantly, and it's devastating, sad if we're supposed to be Christians known by our love.
That's right. Yeah.
So sometimes maybe it is there are divisions over.
Sure, there are, and there shouldn't be, but that's because we're human beings and we're messed up.
Agreed.
Yeah, and that's why we need a savior.
Yes.
Okay, so we should expect these things to happen.
Yes.
Don't be alarmed when people act like people.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe you can direct people back to Romans 14 and study that passage, because that's really what Paul's talking about.
Cool. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Carl.
Hey. Well, I was hoping somebody else would ask this, so I'm just going to softball it to you, let you expand on it, because I think that it needs expansion.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you have to have God to have morality? Because Sam Harris, of course, one of the four horsemen of the neo-atheist apocalypse, likes to say that through genetic evolution, we have come to a point where morality, whilst it may not mean anything on this spiritual level, it is good for the herd. It is good for human survival. It is ingrained in people now, genetically and through evolution, to not kill each other because we genetically want to perpetuate the species. So I want you to speak on that a little bit more, because I know that there's people in here who have that in the back of their mind, and I just wanted to have you expand on that.
Let me see if I can can evolution account for morality?
There you go.
Okay. First of all, we need to point out that moral laws are not chemical or biological. They are immaterial, and they come from personal agents. So there's no mutating genetic code that has any authority to tell you or me or anyone else how to behave, right? Secondly, chemistry and biology are descriptive. They're not prescriptive. Evolution describes what does survive. It doesn't tell us what ought to survive. So why humans? Why not dolphins or roaches or kangaroos? You know, what Sam Harris is doing is he's smuggling a moral law into his system to get it to work, right? He's trying to assume that human beings are valuable and we ought to treat one another to promote human flourishing. Well, I generally agree with Sam Harris. That's what we ought to do. But only a theist can justify that. He can't. Also, should we rape to survive? If survival is our end, as some evolutionists will say, then if we can propagate our genes by raping, why shouldn't we do that? We could also ask the question, should we murder the weak to help others to survive? That's Hitler's agenda there. Hitler, in his mind, was trying to do a good thing. The tyrants are always trying to do good things, right? I mean, Thanos wants to knock out, half of the population, right? To do a good thing. You know that. By the way, we're having a book come out next year called Hollywood Heroes, How Your Favorite Movies Reveal God. Look for it. Anyway,
perfect.
Should we murder the weak to help others? If evolution is true, why not? And since evolution is a process of change, then morals must change. Rape may one day be considered good, according to evolution. And then finally, they say, well, we just got to do it to cooperate. Well, why cooperate when not cooperating often helps you survive? Like, for example, Stalin didn't have to cooperate. He had a bunch of henchmen. He killed millions of his own people and then took their stuff and lived comfortably until he died on his deathbed at the age of 74, shaking his fist at God one last time. So there's so many problems with this. There is no ontological, big word meaning being. There's no ontological ground for morality outside of God himself. Everything else would just be Sam Harris's opinion against Hitler's opinion. Right. So you need God for morality. You also need God to set purpose, because without purpose, as we talked about earlier, there's no way to determine whether acting a certain way is good because it's taking you toward that purpose, or bad, taking you away from that purpose. Morality requires purpose, just like football requires purpose. Otherwise, you wouldn't know what a good play was and what a bad play was.
And of course, I agree with you. You know that.
Yeah.
But I wanted you to be able to expand on that and just.
Sure.
And I think it makes sense that just like a lion who kills a gazelle, he did nothing morally wrong. If we are made up of the same stardust, the same mutated evolutionary atoms, but have no moral grounding, there would be no difference between a lion killing a gazelle and another person killing another person. That morally, it's the same.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right. Thanks, Carl. Josh.
Hi, Frank. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming to our campus. We really appreciate it. So I was hoping for, as a Christian, a strategy or some advice to deal with someone who's using circular logic or an incoherent or illogical statements to sort of keep proving the same point when you're trying to bring a more coherent.
Have you asked the person, is the person a non-Christian?
Yeah, well, most of the people I talk to.
Have you asked the person if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian?
And I run into different answers.
Like what?
Well, yes or no.
Yeah, what do they say?
Well, like he said, it depends.
If they say no or they hesitate.
No, then it's a moral issue.
It doesn't matter how much evidence you give them.
Right.
It doesn't matter. They don't care.
Right.
They want to do their own thing. They're looking for God as much as a criminal's looking for a cop.
So, is it prayer then?
Prayer, love them as best you can. Sometimes what will happen, because it happens to all of us, that there's some tragedy that strikes, and then your phone is going to ring and that person's going to be on the other end. They're not going to call their atheist buddy. What's the atheist buddy going to say? There's no rhyme or reason to this. Stuff just happens. They're going to call you a person of spiritual depth if you've earned that right up to that point. But no, not even God can steer a parked car. If they don't want to go anywhere, it doesn't matter what you do.
Can't just beat them with a Bible.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thanks. All right, yes, sir. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Eric. I'm just asking a question for someone that I know.
Okay.
They claim to be agnostic.
Uh-huh.
So if God were real, why is he making it so hard for people to discover him? So Jesus says, seek, you'll find, knock, you'll be answered, seek the kingdom, right? So it's all this verbiage about seeking. If he is the one true God and the God of the universe, for example, the picture that you showed of the thousands of galaxies, why does Jesus, let's bring it down to Christianity, why does he make it so hard for us to find him now? So he appeared 2,000 years ago, and then before that as well, through signs and wonders. But in this particular age, why doesn't he just go, what's up, Buddha, get out of the way, Muhammad, stay dead, like all that stuff. Why doesn't he just show up?
So it's more like a hiddenness of God question. Like, why is God hidden, and why doesn't he just clear everything up?
Yes.
Well, let's go back to belief that, belief in. Is God just concerned about us putting another thought in our belief system? Oh, yeah, God exists. Got it. No, he's not just concerned about that. He wants to make sure that we go from belief that to belief in. Apparently, it's not all that hard to know that God exists because most people do believe he exists, right? But a lot of people know he exists intellectually, but they won't go the next step and trust in him. Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, has a good story about this. He says, suppose there was a king or a prince in a given jurisdiction, and he sees a beautiful young virgin maiden in his jurisdiction who he sees and he immediately falls in love with. And he goes to his father, the king, and he says, Dad, I love that girl, but she's not royalty. How can I earn her hand in marriage? And the father says, you can't go to her as the prince, because she may just then come to you because of your power and prestige and everything she's going to get, and one day she could possibly be the queen. You won't know if she really loves you. She won't know if she really loves you. She might just be overwhelmed with all the power. So if you really want to love her, what you need to do is you need to renounce the throne, go into the village as a peasant, and win her as a peer. So he did. That's exactly what Jesus did for us. He came into this space-time continuum as a peer, and he allowed us to actually torture and kill him so he could save us. But if he came in on a white horse and said, I'm God, and you better get on board or else, are we really going to go willingly? Are we really going to have a love relationship? No, God has to descend in order for us to accept him as a peer, and he did. Now, I think enough belief that, so we know that he exists and that Jesus rose from the dead. But to go from belief that to belief in, that's a matter of the heart. And a lot of people don't want to do that. Caiaphas himself knew Lazarus was risen by Jesus, and what did he do? Let's kill this guy and kill Lazarus too, right? So again, it's not a matter of enough evidence. It's a matter of the will. It's not a matter of the evidence for God's existence. It's a matter of the evidence of our resistance. We don't want him. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir. Ben?
Keenan.
Keenan. There's a guy here that looked like you was Ben. Anyway, go ahead.
Fair enough. Well, that man is
Keenan.
not me.
All right.
So I wanted to play, I agree with you on pretty much what we've gone through today, including arguing morality from a perspective without God is near impossible. But I wanted to play devil's advocate a little bit here and get your thoughts. So you mentioned without God, should we rape to survive? Obviously, rape can propagate new life. There's conception, there's birth, there's a new child. Well, could the argument be made that because even though there's a new life, this new life is now often raised in a home without a father, often raised with a mother that does not love them as well, and therefore are not as cooperative with society, that child who came out of rape is now often a harm to society in many ways because they were not raised well? Could the argument be made that evolution accounted for this and created a pseudo-morality because to not rape, because children of rape typically become more of a harm on society?
But you see, all that presupposes harm, and it presupposes that people are valuable, which doesn't exist in an atheistic worldview. You would need to steal that from a theistic worldview to say people are valuable to begin with, and we ought not rape them, and we ought not murder them, and we ought to do what helps them flourish. But that presupposes that people are valuable, more valuable than roaches, more valuable than dolphins, more valuable than giraffes.
Right, because survival is, in order for us to have a necessity to survive, we must have a worth to survive, even evolutionarily.
Well, I'm just saying from an evolutionary perspective, without God, they are smuggling in these words and these concepts like harm and benefit and good and bad and flourishing and non-flourishing as if human beings have value. They don't by their own worldview. Human beings are just a bag of chemicals, more complex than a bag of chemicals in a dog, but they're the same. There's no way to differentiate in value between them because there's no value in evolution. There's no value in an atheistic worldview. We're just on a planet that's ultimately going to go to heat death, and it's all going to be over. What's the point?
For sure.
Have a nice day. All right?
Thanks for your thoughts.
All right, thank you.
We can only allow maybe one more question because we've actually only got the space till 9, so...
All right, yeah, well, this will be the last one then. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead. Yes.
So I've had a non-believing friend ask me...
Lena?
Yeah, Lena,
okay,
sorry.
Lena.
So my non-believing
Tilt that down a
friend
little bit, Lena,
asked
that mic. Go ahead. All right, there you go.
Well, she said, if God just wants people to love him and he made a universe that people would just bow down and worship him, then why would he give us free will? So I wanted to hear your take on it.
Well, because free will is necessary for love. Remember, go back to the Hitchens example. If we're just chemicals, if we're moist robots, can we really love? No, we can't. Love requires free will. And so if this world is just a group of moist robots walking around, we are not lovers. We're just robots. We're not haters either. There's no moral capacity if there's not free will. So go back to the original question again, though. What was the implication of the question?
Yeah, she just was confused about, like, if all that God wanted was a world where people would bow down and worship him and love him, then, yeah, why would we have free will? Because
worship requires free will. And God doesn't need our worship. Look, God's an infinite being. You don't add to him by worshiping him. You don't subtract to him by cursing him. We're the ones that get the benefit of worship, and we're the ones that get the detriment of cursing God. God doesn't need us. He's infinite. We're the ones that need God, so why does he want him to worship us? For our benefit. That's why he wants. What's God, a cosmic ego? No. He doesn't need us. We need him. That's the point.
All right.
All right?
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, folks. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, if you would, John, tell people where you're meeting on Tuesday, if you would, at the mic. Huh?
Meetings are at Escalante 243 at 6:45. Escalante 243, 6:45 on Tuesdays.
I'll see you at the book
Every
table
Tuesday.
if anyone wants to talk. Thanks for watching, folks.